Thank you, everyone, for taking your seats. So we can get started with our program tonight. We are so thrilled, the board, the facilitators, and I, to see this room filled with people at such a busy time of the summer. And we are indebted to you all for supporting us, and especially indebted to Rose Styron, who in her busy life is willing to share her time and talents with Women Empowered and with all of us. Before I begin, I would like to extend some other thank yous to Rose, first of all. Secondly, to Women Empowered's office manager, Darren, who was your greeter at the front table, who did a fabulous job with all of that. Thirdly, we couldn't have done this without the support of our sponsors. Their names are in your program. Thank you to them as well. Thank you to Sterling, who said the evening wouldn't be complete without music, so he came with music. Sterling is one of our board members. And special thanks to the Harborview Hotel for providing this wonderful space and giving us such beautiful weather tonight. So following my introduction and Rose's talk, Rose will entertain some questions from the podium, and then we'll break and we'll have a little reception. You can enjoy wines or soft drinks, whatever is available in the back, and we will have lots of hors d'oeuvres coming around. So it's going to be a fabulous evening. We hope you'll enjoy it. One of the wonderful things that Rose said to me as we met recently to get ready for this evening was, why don't you take a few minutes and talk about Women Empowered? Because a lot of people will be there who may not know much about this organization. And so I'd like to do that for just a few minutes now. Women Empowered actually has been around on the Vineyard for 12 years now, and it's a wonderful testament to one person who saw a need and who did something about it. 12 years ago, a retired special education teacher who originally was from Iowa and who married a Vineyard man came here, and she noticed as she interacted with people on the Vineyard that many of the people she met who were struggling weren't getting the help that they needed. And they weren't struggling medically. They didn't need legal help. They didn't need therapy. It wasn't that kind of struggle. It was the kind of struggle that happens to all of us when we run into a complication in life. For our clients, one of the hugest complications is financial issues. Extraordinary debt, often not due to their own fault, debt due to medical expenses, debt due to family obligations. We have many people who come to us and they're afraid of losing their homes. They're afraid they may have to declare bankruptcy. And then we have people who come to us only needing someone to sit down with them and to help them work out a budget and help them figure out how to follow it. So a lot of our clients, I would say 70 or 80% of our clients, have a financial related problem. Many of our clients have job related issues. They might have lost their jobs, or they might want to change a job, or in one case I can remember recently I had a mother call. She'd been out of the workforce for 20 years, and she said, I don't know how to get back. I haven't done a resume. I don't know how to interview. And that's what we do. We take whatever problem comes to us, and we work with the person to help solve that problem, but we don't solve it for them. This is an organization that empowers people to solve their own problems. And those are some examples of the problems we solve. We do that with a group, a team that we have. We now have 13 facilitator coaches working with us. We train them, so we're very standard in the way that we work with clients. But these facilitators are the heart of our organization. They are, for the most part, retired career professionals with fabulous skills who have moved to the island and who just want to share and give back to others. On our team, we have an economist who worked with the World Bank. We have a superintendent of schools. We have real estate agents. We have a CEO from a corporation. We have a small business owner, and those are just a few examples. We have a banker. Those are just a few examples of the kinds of people who have come forward to volunteer. And so what I do, I'm the executive director. My name is Eileen Pace. And what I do is to interview the clients once they call the office and say that they need help. By the way, they call sometimes because they get referrals from friends we've helped, sometimes because community services or the ACE program, the adult education at the high school program, might tell them that we could help them. And sometimes they just see our ads in the newspaper. But when they call us, I interview them. Usually that takes about an hour. We write up a report, we analyze their situation, and then I try to pair them with someone on our team who I feel would be best to work with them. Now, some of our people come to us, and in 3 meetings, let's say 1 meeting a week for 3 weeks, they've solved their issue. We had a retired person who was worried about how long her pension would last. She came to us and she said, "Can you help me? I'm getting worried." And so we had a person who was skilled who sat with her. And 3 weeks later, she left feeling very happy and very secure. We have other people, and our clients, by the way, range in age. That last year they ranged from 20 to 84 years old. Men and women. But just because we're called Women Empowered does not mean we don't serve men. In fact, we even have a man on our facilitator team. But people come to us, and sometimes they're with us a year, sometimes more than a year. We stay with them however long it takes for them to be empowered to carry on with their lives. Sometimes these situations arise because of the death of a spouse or a partner who perhaps did all the financial arrangements for a lifetime, and people are at wit's end, and they don't know where to go or what to do. So those are some examples of the kinds of situations we deal with. One very unique aspect of Women Empowered is that we do not screen clients, we don't screen anyone out, we don't look at income, and we don't charge a penny. Everything we do is free of charge. And so we really depend on our donor drives, we depend on our pledges, and we depend on your support in evenings like this. Now, I could talk all night about what we do and about our clients, but I wanted to make plenty of time for Rose. But let me end by saying that on the table at the back, the table that you came in to see at registration, we'll have some materials about some of what Rose is going to talk about tonight, and we'll also have brochures, just a flyer about Women Empowered. Please take it, just read it, and give it to a friend. You know, you may have someone in your circle of friends or your family who could use our help. Pass it on to someone else. On the flyer as well, there is a web address. We have a website. And on that website, there are some testimonials of people whom we have helped. And you might be very interested in reading some of those. So be an ambassador for us. Thank you for being here. And now let me just tell you a little bit about how I got to know this wonderful lady sitting here to my left. About a year ago, trying to reach a wider audience for Women Empowered, started calling people I knew who really cared about the community and who were active here. And I happened to reach Rose in Connecticut while she was packing up her house to move full-time to the Vineyard. She is now full-time a year-round Vineyard. And she said, call me in the fall. So I did. She was very gracious. She did not know me. She did not know Women Empowered. She listened to me. She read our materials, and she agreed to be our featured speaker for our 2012 fundraiser. We were so happy and so grateful. The only problem I've had with Rose is trying to reach her. We've had a lot of conversations and a lot of meetings in the last few months, and one time when I called, she was in Cambridge. Another time, she was in Ireland. Another time, she was on her way to Beirut, or to, Beijing. And then I called, and she was in South Africa having an audience with Nelson Mandela. So we are so humbled and pleased that she's giving this time to our little nonprofit. Rose, welcome.
Thank you for that introduction, Elaine. It was very, very, I'm glad to learn more about Women Empowered, which is a terrific organization. I wish I had been in South Africa with Mandela, but that's apocryphal. Maybe we're thinking of Charlene. I have been in there with him, but not in recent years. Anyway, thank you for inviting me to speak on behalf of Women Empowered. And I realize from listening what skills I need. Computer, iPhone apps, budget balancing, memory tricks when I forget to take a pad and pen with me to write everything down. My husband was my memory, and I thought I never had to remember anything, and haven't caught up yet. But these women and men whom you help have all my sympathy and good wishes. I'm actually, as my grandchildren all say, I'm surprised to be talking now on women's rights. My mother, who was a suffragette in 1920, trained and cautioned me to always let men lead. And she meant in school, don't be first in your class, dear. In dancing, in career, in marriage. She, who definitely did not want me to marry Bill Styron, eventually said, you know, if you fight with him and want to have a divorce, I'll be on his side. When Bill and I were married in the 50s in Rome at the Campidoglio, it was legally imperative that I have an English-speaking Italian as part of the ceremony to be sure I understood that I must follow my husband everywhere, no matter what he did. And in the 60s, during the Civil Rights Movement, I made sure I marched on Washington arm in arm with big male Tom Hayden. Of course, at Obama's inauguration in 2009, it was much more fun to get lost, as I did for hours, arm in arm with Charlene Hunter Gold over there. She was pretty big too. She could protect me, but definitely not male. Even when I was first at Amnesty International, and then running PEN's Freedom to Write Committee, and on the board of Human Rights Watch in the 1970s, I lobbied against separate women's rights committees. I thought women's rights were part of human rights and shouldn't be separated out. But luckily, Susan Sontag and I were overruled at Penn, and the women writers got their way, and so did women at Amnesty and Human Rights Watch and the International Rescue Committee. So they all have wonderful divisions, work especially for women, and lots of them get in trouble. You might not see them again. Obviously, I was a bit late for embracing the women's movement. In the 90s, misprint, Christina. In the 70s, my wonderful assistant is here who typed it all for me. In the 70s, I wrote for Ms. Magazine, but I declined Gloria Steinem's invitation to be an upfront colleague. I thought and think Gloria, who was at the forefront of the women's movement, to be quite spectacular. And I liked Betty Friedan and Germaine Greer, and I finally got on the bandwagon. Needless to say, I still adore men. Playing tennis with John Barrow on the Vineyard, or traveling to China with Menemshi's Jeff Cowan are my ideas of 2012 heaven. But I guess, given all this publicity for this event, quite embarrassing to me, but plenty of it. I've become, at this late date, an empowered woman. The press states, women who have become empowered, and the outlook for our helping to empower women worldwide is what I'm supposed to talk about tonight. So I'll try to be not too long. Near me and in the back, you'll see big collages Elaine has made from photographs of the women's organizations I have worked with. take a look at them later. It would be great if any of you decide to support one, but just look and see how much potential for good work there is and how many different women in this country and other countries who have some power or money themselves are working to help those who do not. Naturally, you've got to support we on the Vineyard first. But please, when I pause, feel free to ask questions. If I don't know or have forgotten the answers, I'll point you in the right direction. Because I'm a poet, I need to mention the women poets I know and admire, who are not only really successful, but who live on or are regular visitors to the Vineyard. I think of Fannie Howe, Jory Graham, and Sharon Olds, who have lived here, and Naomi Nye, and Carolyn Forche, and others who visit regularly. You can't hear me? Oh my God. Well, no harm done. Can you hear me now? So gradually, largely through poetry and my human rights work, I came into contact with and became friends with women who had steadfastly empowered themselves. For example, wonderful, confident actresses like Mia Farrow, whom I met on my beach here, and Liv Ullman, who I first went to Florida with to interview abandoned Chinese children, and Meryl Streep, who from her days in Bob Brewstein's Yale repertory is the unequaled activist as well as the unequaled actress then and now. And even though, of course, I'm not as close to them, first ladies who've been here, like Hillary Clinton and Nancy Reagan, whom I first met at Kay Graham's. And remember Katharine Graham, owner and publisher of the Washington Post, whose book tracks her own unlikely rise to fame, was for years called the most powerful woman in the world. She cleverly managed on my own vineyard lawn to bring the warring Catholics and Protestants of Northern Ireland together during the Troubles. They had been invited to Harvard to have a conference, assuming that if they were not in Northern Ireland, they would speak to each other freely. Well, it didn't happen. We all went to the conference, and the Catholics were on one side, the Protestants on another side. They didn't talk to each other at all. And so it was kind of a disaster. And one of the directors, our friend Wendy Lors, who is also here on this island, said to me, "Why don't you have them all down to the Vineyard on your lawn, and they'll go swimming and get drunk, and they'll talk to each other?" And that's pretty much what happened. But the main force was Kay Graham, because they all wanted to meet her, and they all wanted her approval. So the heads of both major parties who were here and their acolytes clustered around Kay at dinner, and they outdid themselves to be polite and nice to her and each other. And they went back and talked to each other at Harvard, and they talked to each other in Belfast when they got back. So I think that's what an empowered woman can do for us. It was a funny day because Skip Gates was host in Oak Bluffs, where it all started, because that's where the boat landed. And the Sinn Féin and the others did not speak to each other. They were totally separate tables. So I was asked by Skip to table hop. He's very good at it. And anyway, by the time I invited them all to my house to swim, and we had drinks, and they all swam and got drunk, and okay, I picked them up there, and the rest is, you know, some kind of history. There's another wonderful woman, Navi Pillay, the first South African woman of color to be a judge in South Africa, and the chief judge in the Rwanda trials I attended in Arusha, Tanzania. And she's now a most effective High Commissioner for Human Rights for the UN and based in Geneva. She became a friend of some islanders who were here, Tess Bramhall and Connie Ellis and our friend Mary Wallace in Durban when we visited Charlene some years ago. And then our most excellent Secretaries of State, Hillary Clinton and Madeleine Albright, who've been here, of course. They were coincidentally Wellesley graduates after me. But Madeleine's new Institute for Global Affairs at Wellesley promotes women's education toward the public sector, and it's going to be a big success. It's just started. And we're quite eager, all of us, for Hillary to return to the private sector and the Vineyard after her stellar work. The Vineyard being a very special place that breeds lasting friendships. And finally, I guess, last week, many of us got a glimpse of Elizabeth Warren's quite effective campaign for the Senate from Massachusetts. And many of us have our fingers crossed because we were pretty impressed. Then there are at the top of any list the stellar women who became presidents of their country. Mary Robinson and Mary McAleese in Northern Ireland, Michelle Bachelet in Chile, and Ellen Sirleaf Johnson in Liberia. And Aung San Suu Kyi, who I just met, I'm led to believe will be president of Myanmar, she can't say Burma anymore, 2 years from now. The Ludwigs, who I traveled with to meet Suu Kyi, are here, much to my surprise. It was a meaningful, to me, meeting in Dublin just a few weeks ago. I was most impressed and moved by her speech as she accepted Amnesty International's Ambassador of Conscience Award. It was Suu Kyi's 68th birthday, I think, and Bill Shipsey, Amnesty's Irish barrister, who has a summer house in Katama, some of you may know him, he arranged a concert. I think it's the best concert I ever went to, with Bono and the River Dancers and Vanessa Redgrave reading Seamus Heaney's poetry, and the lead violinist of the French National Orchestra, who actually danced with her violin, and the top Irish fiddler, plus dancers and young performers from everywhere. Suu Kyi flew into Dublin from Oslo, where she picked up her Nobel Prize, and out the same night from Dublin to London in order to meet the Dalai Lama for breakfast. So she's an empowered woman, for sure. Looking beautiful, though a bit tired, she said, "I didn't know till I visited 3 countries this past week." I think they were India, Norway, and Ireland at this point. How much people cared, how much people outside of Burma really cared about us, and that moved all of us tremendously. Amnesty's only 2 previous Ambassador of Conscience Award recipients were Václav Havel and Nelson Mandela, and Suu Kyi is a real hero who certainly deserves to be with them. Also important to me, and I think for all of us, are the exceptional women activists who live here or frequent our island annually. Several have founded international organizations to help empower women and girls through microfinancing, education, craft skills, and marketing, to lift them from poverty and disease and despair in war-decimated towns and water-starved rural villages. I think of Charlene, Hunter Galt, and Gloria White Hammond. Is she here? Gloria?
Right here. She's on the air. She's
Where
there.
are you?
Right here.
Hi, I didn't see you. Hi. I was hoping you'd come. You should talk to both of them afterwards about their project, My Sister's Keeper, and about Sudan. Have you just come back from Sudan again? I'll hear about that later on. And to Nancy Parrish, who could not be here, her new organization for American servicewomen abused in the military. And my Amnesty colleagues who are not here, but who are working for the health of Native American women raped by outsiders. I think their work really dovetails in a way. And here almost every summer, whom we miss in 2012, our ex-ambassador for human rights to the UN, Nancy Rubin, who also founded a seminal women's health organization in California. Footnote to that, she and I, Nancy and I, along with Catherine O'Neill and Urati Kazikas, whom you all may know of, two exemplary, politically savvy women, went to Sarajevo when it was a melted down post-war metropolis. After the Dayton Accords, we went and met with amazing women who individually brought a measure of stability and education to the city their men had left to fight. The men whom we saw were all either, they were wounded either physically or mentally, and you would see them in the morning leaning over the rivers, bridges and parapets, or in a little cafe with a drink. But the women were all in their stylish raincoats and hats, out all dressed up to go meet us. When we arrived, we got our schedule from the State Department, done it for us, and they said we had to meet with NGOs, and there were 18 NGOs. We couldn't imagine how they could have put together 18 NGOs when the war was just over. Each NGO was one woman who was very smart and figured out that was the way to get to us. And when we returned, the State Department sent money and microfinancing for every single one of their projects in order to get things back on track. One other person I want to mention is Eileen Adams, who left their family home in Menemsha last weekend. She took a most challenging, physically challenging course to become a policewoman in California in order to monitor rape cases. And she founded the first American Rape Center, which is still the global model for all such facilities. Since then, she's been a star at the Department of Justice and Secretary of the State of California, and right now is LA's deputy mayor. So she'd be a really interesting person for you all to talk to when she gets back. Then there's wonderful Geraldine Brooks, our island's Pulitzer Prize novelist, who started out being a leader among risk-taking women journalists. And it's really awful how many women journalists have been killed recently. 2 in Afghanistan, not the 2 beautiful ones you see on whose pictures on the wall, but 2 others, one named Zakia Zaki, who were killed because they wanted to promote women's rights on the radio and on TV. One was shot in her bed with her son, and the other one was drowned. But anyway, this is very recent, and it's just the journalists are really that's better? Okay, the journalists are the ones who I think are really suffering, I mean male and female journalists, because they report the truth, and that's dangerous. And then, I'm sorry she's not here tonight, but she often comes to visit and stays at Susan Swartz's, is Geraldine Dreyfus. her production of Born into Brothels, which publicized the plight of young girls in Calcutta, won an Oscar recently, and she's off to do other wonderful things for women. The newest organization to catch my attention is our friend Meredith Brokaw's Maloto, which has been teaching destitute women with once starving children in Malawi to grow bumper crops of tomatoes and to can them and to sell them worldwide. And I went to their first meeting with a lot of seniors and graduate students, young women who were there to help them figure out how to do this. And I said, and they said it was already underway and the women were smiling and the children weren't starving anymore. And I said, well, how did you manage to teach them to can? I understand about the growing and the marketing. And Meredith said, oh, well, this was our first year, so we took over 1,000 mason jars in a plane. Next year we'll teach them to can. Apparently it was getting to be successful. Anyway, you'll see, if you look around here and there where Elaine has done all the pasting up of pictures from those different organizations, it's nice to see the smiles on the faces of the women and children. So, enough of my women's movement for name dropping. So now we can each, on to what we can each do besides support women empowered. You see all the pictures around the room of women, brave women, in countries where they are neither properly respected or protected, and who need all the help we can give them, especially so their children will physically survive and grow up and be educated. The organization's names, I hope, are somewhere on these pictures, but among the top are Equality Now, Women for Women. I'll just tell you a little bit about a couple of them, and then I've talked long enough. The one that I started out with, and I think it was one of the first international women's organizations, was called Equality Now. It just had its 20th anniversary, and it's been extremely successful. It works in more than 30 countries, and it's dedicated to action for the civil, political, economic, and social rights of women and girls. One of the reasons I think it's been so successful is that its co-founder, Jessica Newworth, who's at the UN, and Navi Pillay, who I mentioned before, who is High Commissioner for Human Rights, they have pushed it internationally in more than 30 countries. They're trying to change so much around the world. In Liberia, for instance, they're trying to get rid of female genital mutilation and get a woman named Ruth Berry Peel's case swiftly concluded. The first thing I did for Equality Now was to go to Wackenhut prison, which is where women who were escaping female genital mutilation and had gotten falsified papers in order to get away and be safe and come to the U.S., they would arrive at JFK and think they were safe, and their papers were all false, and they smiled and said, yes, you know, they're false because we want asylum here and we're escaping. Well, they were all handcuffed and put in orange jumpsuits and taken to Wackenhut prison and really mistreated. And if they had children with them, for any reason, the children were taken away from them and sent to Florida. And when I said that I'd been with Liv Ullman down to interview Chinese students, I was also trying to find these women's children so that eventually they could be returned. But they're just all sorts of things that we as protected Americans don't know about and need to learn about. It's also been so successful because Meryl Streep started with us and stuck with us, and she's been a great promoter of that. So then there are lots of others. There's a wonderful one that's not very old called Women for Women. The executive director, Afshan Khan, spent 25 years with UNICEF, and so she's now come in with Nancy Rubin, among other people. Women for Women International says its mission is to provide survivors of war, civil strife, and other conflicts with the tools and resources to move from crisis and poverty to stability and self-sufficiency, thereby promoting vital civil societies. We're changing the world one woman at a time is their motto. It's a tall order. Equality Now, for instance, is working in Saudi Arabia to lift the fatwa on women driving. Women are not allowed to drive and not allowed to be in a car without a man. And so they're trying to end male guardianship of women and end child marriages. And in Morocco, they're working to end legal exemption for rapists if the rapists offer to marry their victims. Then they're not prosecuted.
Oh my God.
So, anyway, let's see. I told you a little bit about Moloto, my sister's keeper, who we can talk to Gloria about, says it's a leading organization which tries to move women from average to excellence. The foundation is dedicated to equipping and empowering a diverse community of women, assisting them with their educational pursuits and goals and acquisitions of skill and personal and professional development. Sounds like we, on a much bigger scale. And there's Amnesty International, which I've been with since the beginning. I won't go into detail. I did a 50th anniversary event for them here on the island last year. Charlene was our moderator, and we had Harry Belafonte and Mia Farrow's son, Ronan Farrow, as the opposites on our program, the 60s activist and the 2010 and 11 State Department apologist, if you will, because he worked there. And the two of them became best friends afterwards because they understood that they were on each other's wavelength. One of the interesting things I've been involved with lately is a conference on neuroscience and conflict resolution. And the neuroscientists have figured out how when the brain feels safe and feels that the other brain, its opponent, is on its wavelength and respects it, even if it disagrees, then they can come forth and negotiate. And I must say I saw that in action just recently up at MIT, so there are things happening quite near us. And last word on Amnesty, we have our very first Amnesty USA woman director, who is certainly an empowered woman, Suzanne Nassel, who has been with the State Department and handles congressional relations, and hopefully will move us forward. Amnesty points out that women are 80% of all refugees and displaced persons, and that rape and sexual violence targeting women and girls are routinely used not only to terrorize women, but as strategic tools of war and instruments of genocide. And Amnesty believes that women are powerful peace builders whose efforts to prevent conflict and secure peace have been critical. So they have several new things of that. Several new programs, I meant to say. Human Rights Watch has been doing a wonderful job for women in Pakistan, Saudi Arabia. They even got Saudi Arabia to allow qualified women to compete for the first time in the 2012 Olympics in London. So they do many different things. And the Women's Refugee Commission advocates for laws and policies and programs to improve the lives and protect the rights of refugees and internally displaced women and young people, including those seeking asylum. And I'll just mention for 1 second again, Nancy Parrish's new Protect Our Defenders organization to help women returning from war. So that's enough. If anybody wants to ask me questions, do, and if they don't, we can go have a drink. Any questions, or should we go out? Elaine, you run this part of it.
Are there any questions? Or would you prefer just to interact with Rose one-on-one? That may be your preference. Anne?
I would just like to say what an outstanding person you have been and what your life has done for women's organizations. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's a question over here. I'm sorry, Rose. Oh, I'm sorry.
I do have a question. I was quite surprised to hear about the situation in Morocco. And what struck me was that it may be challenging sometimes to find time or resources to volunteer and so forth, but most people travel. And I wondered if there were any, quite a few friends have gone to Morocco or have talked about Morocco, but I don't think they would be familiar with the women's rights situation that you detailed. And I wonder if there are any, I don't want to put you on the spot, but are there any other countries where one of the ways that we could be supportive of women's rights is by not putting our tourism dollars into those economies, or any ways that you might recommend through travel or other things that we might be supportive?
Well, our own State Department jumped in and said, don't travel to Burma, don't travel. So they put restrictions and sanctions on it. My own feeling is we should go there, go be with the people, listen to them, take notes, and see what we can do to help, because I think face-to-face being with people is the way to get things moved forward. And that's just my opinion.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Have you ever felt endangered in any way in any of these crusades and wonderful things that you've done?
Of course. Yes. I felt it in Chile, I felt it in Czechoslovakia, I felt it in Romania, I felt it at the airport in Johannesburg. Yeah, I felt it several times. I think that's part of the game, but it's also part of the spur to go and see if you can make things better.
I think you're a really courageous lady.
I'm not. Oh, there's a hand.
Yes, Tess.
Rosie, you mentioned Navi Pillay, and did she not go on to get rape declared a human rights problem at the UN?
Yes, I'm
And
so
how-
glad you mentioned that.
And how does the UN work it? I mean, how do you punish somebody or punish a country? That may be too complicated a question.
Well, there's so many committees and laws by which the UN works. I couldn't tell you exactly how they vote to have sanctions or vote to intervene, but there are all different ways that the UN tries to get things through, and they don't always work. And the American government hasn't been a whole lot of help because they don't want to sign any international treaties, which most other Western thinking countries do, because we're afraid we'll lose our sovereignty, or that one of us may travel abroad and get arrested or trapped. When I was mentioning Harry Belafonte and Ronan Farrow at our Amnesty event last summer, Harry kept saying, which is what all of us who were around in the 60s and after felt, how could you not sign the Treaty of the Child, for protection? And Ronan Farrow said, well, you don't understand how little capital our president has, and he can't expend his capital on one treaty like this, which they felt the Republicans would all oppose, and it would just be too hard to get through. A president can't do it by fiat, but there are lots of other things which we do, which other countries no longer do. We still have the death penalty, and we're the only decent Western country that still has it. A couple of the other countries say, well, the United States still has it, so we're not going to get rid of it. But we have tried every which way. There are a few states which have now outlawed it, but we have tried to use pressure from other countries and from the UN to shame us to getting rid of it, but it hasn't happened. And it was one of my first Amnesty experiences when President Mitterrand was elected. His Minister of Justice, Robert Badinter, got up the next day and declared that there was no more death penalty. And it happened. It was just gone in France. So Amnesty asked me if I would go to France and see how Badinter did it, and would he come to the United States and tell us how to do the same thing. So I went to see Mr. Badinter, who had just found out that, like an hour before I got there, that his father had been killed in Vichy, and he had learned a whole history of his own, which was pretty terrible. But he gallantly said, of course, I'll come to the United States. I think as soon as you can prove that someone was executed in the wrong, someone who was innocent, and you can promote this. This is before everything that's going on now. It was quite a while ago. That the American people will understand, and they'll outlaw capital punishment because they might be killing someone innocent. So he came and he went to all our amnesty sections and he talked all over the country and he went home and nothing changed here. So we have a lot still to do. On that awful note, goodbye.